The Silk Road, one of history's greatest trade routes, spanned 10,000 kilometers across the vast Eurasian landmass, linking the East and the West in a web of commerce, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. More than just a conduit for goods, it shaped civilizations, fostered technological advancements, and influenced the rise and fall of great empires. Over thousands of years, it would transform societies from China to the Mediterranean, leaving a lasting imprint on human history. But long before the Silk Road became a recognized trade network, connections between distant civilizations were already forming. The origins of this legendary route can be traced back to prehistoric times when early humans began migrating, exchanging goods, and developing networks across the continent. The geography of the Silk Road. The Silk Road was not a single highway but rather a network of interconnected trade routes that traversed some of the most challenging terrains on Earth. From the deserts of Central Asia to the towering Himalayas, from the lush valleys of Persia to the bustling cities of the Roman Empire, traders, envoys and explorers braved the elements to seek fortune and knowledge. The journey was perilous. Along the way, travelers had to navigate through the Taklamakan Desert, one of the most dangerous in the world, whose name in the Uyghur language means place of no return. In the north, the Gobi Desert and the steppes of Mongolia provided another barrier, where nomadic tribes roamed, sometimes welcoming traders but often threatening them. Despite the risks, the rewards were immense. Trade flourished because the route connected three major regions. With its prized silk, spices and porcelain, Central Asia and Persia, which provided horses, jade and knowledge, the Mediterranean and Europe, where demand for luxury goods fueled the entire network, early trade and cultural exchange in Eurasia. Before the Silk Road became the well-known trade route we recognize today, exchanges between early civilizations already exist. Humans in the Central Asian steppes had domesticated horses, a key development that would shape trade and warfare for millennia. The first use of horses in warfare came through chariot warfare, a practice seen as early as 1600 BCE in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. However, horseback riding took much longer to develop, only emerging in 900 BCE, when warriors discovered the advantages of mounted combat. Another crucial innovation was the recurved composite bow, which first appeared in Shang Dynasty China. These bows were shorter than traditional longbows, yet far more powerful due to their unique design. They were made using a combination of wood, horn and sinew, bound together with a strong adhesive made from the swim bladders of fish. The result was a weapon that was both compact and lethal, perfect for mounted warriors. By 700 BCE, the Scythians, a nomadic people from southern Russia, had perfected horseback archery, using the recurved bow. They became feared warriors across Eurasia, influencing other cultures such as the Persians, Greeks, and later the Chinese. The rise of the first major trade routes. Although long-distance trade had existed since ancient times, the first organized trade networks began to emerge in the Middle East and Central Asia. One of the earliest known long-distance trade routes was the Royal Road of the Persian Empire, built by Darius I in the 5th century BCE. This road stretched over 2,500 kilometers, connecting the Persian capital of Persepolis to Sardis, in Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. At the same time, in the east, China had begun expanding its influence beyond its borders. One of the first civilizations to bridge the gap between the East and West was the Parthian Empire. The Parthians were skilled horse archers, and their dominance over key trade routes in Central Asia played a major role in the development of the Silk Road. The Battle of Karha, 53 BCE, and Rome's introduction to silk. One of the most pivotal moments in early Silk Road history occurred in 53 BCE, at the Battle of Karha. The Roman Republic, led by Marcus Licinius Crassus, sought to expand its influence eastward by invading Parthia. Confident in their superior numbers, the 40,000-strong Roman army faced 10,000 Parthian cavalry, but the Parthians had a devastating advantage: horse archers and cataphracts, heavily armored cavalry unit. Unlike the Roman legionaries, who fought in tight formations, The Parthians used hit-and-run tactics, surrounding the Romans and launching thousands of arrows from their swift-moving horses. The Romans attempted to form a testudo formation, where soldiers locked their shields together to create a protective shell, but the Parthians countered this by deploying heavily armored cataphracts, who broke through their ranks. The result was a crushing defeat for Rome, with 30,000 Roman soldiers killed or captured. It was one of the worst defeats in Roman military history. Legend has it that during the battle, Parthian banners were made of silk, dazzling the Romans who had never seen such a fabric before. Whether true or not, around this time, silk from China began flowing into Roman markets, becoming one of the most sought-after luxuries in the empire. This demand would give rise to the legendary Silk Road, connecting China with the Mediterranean world. China's expansion and the formalization of the Silk Road. By the 2nd century BCE, the Han Dynasty was establishing control over vast regions of China and beyond. One of the greatest figures in this expansion was Emperor Han Wudi, who played a key role in securing the trade routes that would become the Silk Road. To the west of China, the powerful nomadic Xiongnu Confederation dominated the Central Asian steppes. The Xiongnu were fierce warriors, constantly raiding Chinese settlements and trade caravans. To counter this threat, Emperor Han Wudi launched a series of military campaigns, successfully pushing the Xiongnu northward and gaining control of Hexi Corridor, a crucial passage that linked China to the west. It was during this time that the first recorded Chinese envoy to Central Asia was sent, Zhang Qi. His journey provided China with vital intelligence about the vast trade networks stretching across Central Asia, including the powerful Kushan Empire and the rich cities of Bactria. Zhang Qi's reports paved the way for direct trade between China and the Western world. Soon Chinese silk, paper and ceramics flowed westward, while Persian glassware, Roman gold and Central Asian horses traveled east. The birth of the Silk Road and the first golden age of trade. By 100 BCE, the Silk Road was fully established, linking China to the Middle East, India and Europe. It became the most important trade network in the ancient world. The Silk Road not only facilitated trade, but also spread ideas, religions, technologies and even disease. Buddhism traveled from India to China, Greek artistic styles influenced Buddhist sculpture, and medical knowledge was exchanged between Persians and Chinese scholars. But with prosperity also came dangers. Bandits, warlords, and shifting political powers threatened traders along the road. To maintain security, powerful empires like the Han Dynasty, the Parthians, and the Romans invested heavily in protecting trade networks. The power of Central Asian nomads and the struggle for control. As the Silk Road emerged as the most crucial trade network in the ancient world, it became a contested space. The vast Central Asian steppes, stretching from Mongolia to the Caspian Sea, were home to powerful nomadic tribes who controlled the key trade. These nomads, who could move swiftly, fight with deadly precision, and control vast territories, played a crucial role in shaping the history of the Silk Road. While China, Persia and Rome sought control over the trade routes, they faced continuous threats from these steppe warriors. Empires were forced to negotiate, fight or ally with them, to maintain the flow of goods, wealth and influence. The nomadic warriors of the Silk Road, unlike the settled civilizations of Rome, Persia and China, the nomadic peoples of Central Asia were mobile, adaptable, and highly skilled in warfare. The Xiongnu, the greatest threat to China, in the 3rd century BCE, as China under the Qin dynasty was unifying into a centralized state, a powerful nomadic empire was forming to its north, the Xiongnu Confederation. The Xiongnu were master horse archers, feared for their ability to strike suddenly and vanish into the steppes. They raided Chinese settlements, demanding silk, grain and gold as tribute. Their attacks on northern China threatened the safety of Silk Road merchants and forced Chinese rulers to either fight them or appease them. To counter the Xiongnu, Emperor Qin Shi Huang ordered the construction of what would later become the Great Wall of China. This early wall was meant to prevent Xiongnu incursions and secure Chinese trade routes, but the Xiongnu could not be easily stopped. During the Han Dynasty, launched military campaigns against the Xiongnu, pushing them back into Mongolia, and securing Chinese control over Hexi Corridor, a critical section of the Silk Road. This victory allowed China to expand westward and connect directly with Central Asian trade network. The Huaizhi and the rise of the Kushan Empire. While the Xiongnu terrorized northern China, another nomadic group, the Huaizhi, were also seeking power. Originally from northwestern China, the Huaizhi were forced to migrate westward by the Xiongnu in the 2nd. They eventually settled in Bactria, modern-day Afghanistan and Tajikistan, and over time formed the Kushan Empire. The Kushan played a crucial role in Silk Road trade, connecting China, India, Persia and Rome. Under Emperor Kanishka, the Kushans controlled some of the most important trade cities in Central Asia. They became powerful middlemen, facilitating the exchange of silk and porcelain from China, spices and Buddhism from India, glassware and gold from Rome. Buddhism flourished under the Kushans and spread along the Silk Road, reaching China and influencing Chinese philosophy and art. The Kushan Empire's wealth came from controlling Silk Road caravans, collecting taxes and ensuring the safety of merchants. But just as the Kushans had displaced the Huaizhi, new powers would soon emerge to take control. The Sassanian Empire and the Persian silk monopoly. By the 3rd century CE, a new power dominated Persia and the Middle East, the Sassanian Empire. The Sassanians were fierce rivals of both Rome and China, and they saw the Silk Road as a means to enrich their empire. Unlike the nomadic steppe warriors, the Sassanians were a highly organized imperial power with sophisticated trade policies. They monopolized the silk trade by controlling routes through Iran and Mesopotamia, forcing the Romans to buy silk at inflated prices. This led to diplomatic tensions between Rome, Persia and China, as Rome sought ways to directly access Chinese silk without Persian interference. To counter Persian dominance, China tried to establish direct contact with Rome. This led to the legendary journeys of Chinese envoys, who sought to bypass Persia and forge alliances with distant Western empires. However, the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, 47 CE, and internal conflicts in Persia, disrupted trade for centuries. The Göktürks, the nomadic empire that controlled the Silk Road, as the Sassanian and Byzantine empires struggled for control of Silk Road trade in the 6th century CE. A new power arose in the Central Asian steppes, the Göktürk Khaganate. The Göktürks were a powerful nomadic confederation that controlled vast territories stretching from Mongolia to the Caspian Sea. They became crucial allies of China, helping to keep trade routes open. However, they also became rivals of the Persian Sassanians, creating a three-way struggle between China, Persia and the Turks. Under Emperor Taizong of the Tang Dynasty, China defeated the Eastern Göktürk and established Chinese control over the Silk Road city. This ushered in a golden age of trade during the Tang Dynasty, when China enjoyed direct and uninterrupted access to the Middle East and Europe. The Mongol Empire, and the Pax Mongolica, 13th, 14th century CE. Of all the nomadic powers that shaped the Silk Road, none had a greater impact than the Mongols. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongols conquered China, Persia and parts of Europe, creating the largest contiguous empire in history. The Mongols established the Pax Mongolica, a period of relative peace and stability across Eurasia, that greatly expanded Silk Road trade. Merchants and diplomats traveled safely from China to Europe. Marco Polo and other Europeans reached the Mongol court in China. Islamic and Chinese technology, such as gunpowder and printing, spread across continents. The Mongols enforced strict laws against banditry, making Silk Road travel safer than ever before. However, this golden age was short-lived. By the 14th century, internal divisions within the Mongol Empire and the spread of the Black Death led to the decline of Silk Road trade. By the 15th century, the rise of the Ottoman Empire and the shift toward maritime trade led to the gradual decline of the overland Silk Road. The golden age of the Silk Road, the spread of ideas, religion and technology. As the Silk Road continued to develop, it became more than just a trade route for goods. It evolved into a vast network of cultural exchange, spreading ideas, religions and technologies across continents. The merchants, travelers and diplomats who moved along these routes carried not only silk, spices and gold, but also philosophy, art, and scientific advancements. The religious highways of the ancient world, the Silk Road was one of history's most important vehicles for the spread of religion. The interaction between merchants, scholars, and travelers led to the exchange of spiritual ideas across Eurasia. The major religions that spread along the Silk Road included Buddhism, from India to China, Korea and Japan, Zoroastrianism, from Persia to Central Asia and China, Christianity, from the Middle East to Central Asia, Manichaeism, from Persia to China and the Mediterranean, Islam, from Arabia to Persia, Central Asia and China. Each of these religions left a profound impact on the cultures they reached. Buddhism, and the journey to the East, perhaps the most significant religious expansion along the Silk Road, was Buddhism's journey from India to China. Buddhism originated in India in the 5th century BCE, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, Buddha. Over time, Indian missionaries and merchants began introducing Buddhism to Central Asia and China. One of the most important figures in this transmission was the Indian Emperor Ashoka of the Maurya Empire. Ashoka, a devout Buddhist, sent missionaries to Central Asia, where Buddhist ideas began to take root. By the 1st century CE, Buddhism had reached China. Buddhist monks and scholars traveled along the Silk Road, stopping at major trading hubs, such as Dunhuang, Kashgar, and Samarkand. Dunhuang became one of the most important centers of Buddhist learning. Located at the crossroads of the Silk Road, Dunhuang housed the famous Mogao caves, filled with Buddhist manuscripts, statues, and frescoes. These caves serve as a record of the artistic and cultural exchanges that took place on the Silk Road. Buddhism continued to spread eastward, reaching Korea and Japan by the 6th and 7th. Zoroastrianism, and the influence of Persian beliefs. Before the rise of Islam, Persia was dominated by Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions, founded by Zarathustra, Zoroastra, in the 6th century BC. The Sassanian Empire, 2261 CE, actively spread Zoroastrianism along its trade routes, especially into Central Asia and China. The fire temples of Samarkand and Bukhara became important centers of Zoroastrian worship. Traces of Zoroastrian beliefs can still be seen in Chinese religious practices, particularly in early Taoism and Buddhism. Christianity in Central Asia and China. Christianity also made its way eastward along the Silk Road. By the 3rd century CE, Christian missionaries from the Roman Empire and Persia had reached Central Asia. These were mostly Nestorian Christians, who followed a distinct branch of Christianity that had split from the Orthodox and Catholic churches. Nestorian Christian communities were established in Persia, Central Asia, and even China. The Tang Dynasty allowed Christian missionaries to settle in Xi'an, where they built churches and translated Christian texts into China. A Nestorian Christian stela stone monument found in Xi'an, dated 7081 CE, provides evidence of an early Christian presence in China, Islam, and the transformation of Central Asia. After the rise of Islam in the 7th century CE, the new faith quickly spread along the Silk Road trade routes. By the 8th century, Arab traders and Islamic scholars had established communities in Persia, Central Asia, and even China. The Great Abbasid Caliphate promoted Silk Road trade and built the city of Baghdad into a major cultural and intellectual center. Islamic influence transformed Central Asia, and by the 10th century cities like Bukhara and Samarkand had become great centers of Islamic learning. The spread of Islam also introduced Arabic numerals, scientific discoveries, and advanced medical knowledge into China and Europe. Silk Road technologies that changed the world. In addition to religious exchange, the Silk Road facilitated the spread of revolutionary technologies that transformed societies. Some of the most important innovations included papermaking and printing. Papermaking was invented in China during the Han Dynasty. By the 8th century CE, Chinese papermaking techniques reached the Islamic world. The Arabs learned how to make paper from Chinese captives after the Battle of Talas. This knowledge later spread to Europe, helping to fuel the Renaissance. 2. Gunpowder and firearms. Gunpowder was first developed by Chinese alchemists in the Tang Dynasty. By the 13th century, the Mongols had carried gunpowder technology westward into Persia and Europe. This innovation transformed global warfare,
leading to the development of cannons and firearms. 3. Silk and textiles. Chinese silk production remained a closely guarded secret for centuries. However, by the 6th century CE, Byzantine spies smuggled silkworm eggs out of China, allowing the Byzantine Empire to establish its own silk industry. 4. The compass and navigation. The Chinese magnetic compass revolutionized navigation. By the 11th century, it had spread to the Islamic world, and eventually reached Europe. This invention enabled long-distance sea travel, paving the way for global exploration. Cultural exchange along the Silk Road. The Silk Road was not just a conduit for religion and technology, it was also a crossroads of culture, art, and philosophy. 1. Chinese and Persian artistic fusion. Chinese paintings and ceramics were influenced by Persian motifs and technique. Persian artisans adopted Chinese artistic styles, creating unique Persian-Chinese ceramics. 2. Greek influence in Central Asia. After Alexander the Great's conquests, Greek art and culture mixed with Buddhist tradition. This led to Greco-Buddhist art, seen in Bactria and Gandhara, modern Afghanistan and Pakistan. 3. Music and dance. From the Middle East to China, Middle Eastern musical instruments, such as the oud and the lute, influenced Chinese music. Chinese dances and performances adopted Persian and Indian styles. The Mongol Empire and the Silk Road's final age. As the Silk Road reached its peak, it connected civilizations like never before. By the 13th century, the world's most powerful empires relied on its routes for trade, diplomacy, and military conquest. Yet no force had ever dominated Eurasia's vast trade networks as completely as the Mongol Empire. The rise of the Mongols, uniting the Silk Road. For centuries, Central Asia was home to nomadic tribes who mastered horseback warfare. These tribes raided trade routes, making long-distance commerce dangerous. But in the early 13th century, a leader named Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, changed everything. By 1206, Genghis Khan had unified the Mongol tribes, creating a disciplined and powerful army. He launched a series of conquests that would make the Mongols the largest contiguous empire in history. The Mongols swept through China, defeating the Jin dynasty in 1234, Persia, destroying the Khwarezmian Empire by 1231, Russia and Eastern Europe, crushing armies in the 1240s, the Middle East, conquering Baghdad in 1258. By the mid-13th century, the Mongols controlled nearly all of the Silk Road, from China to Eastern Europe. The Pax Mongolica, the golden age of Silk Road trade. Despite their reputation for military brutality, the Mongols were brilliant administrators. They understood that controlling trade meant controlling wealth. This led to the Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, a period of unprecedented stability across Eurasia. Under Mongol rule, Silk Road trade flourished like never before. Trade routes were secured, Mongol armies eliminated bandits and protected merchants. A single currency was promoted. The Mongols encouraged the use of paper money, first developed by the Chinese. Religious tolerance allowed diversity. The Mongols permitted the free movement of Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, and others, creating cultural exchange hubs. Postal networks enabled rapid communication. The Yam system, a network of relay stations, allowed messages and goods to travel quickly across Eurasia. For the first time, a merchant could travel from China to Europe with minimal danger, carrying silk, spices, gold, and new inventions. Marco Polo and the West's fascination with the East. During the Pax Mongolica, European travelers reached China. The most famous of these was Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant, who journeyed to Kublai Khan's court in the late 30s. Marco Polo's travel took him across the Silk Road to Persia, modern Iran, where he saw magnificent cities, Samarkand, Uzbekistan, a key Silk Road trade hub, Mongol China, where he claimed to have served Kublai Khan for years. Upon returning to Europe, Polo wrote detailed accounts of China's wealth, paper money, and advanced cities. His book The Travels of Marco Polo inspired European merchants and explorers, including Christopher Columbus centuries later. The spread of Chinese technology to Europe. The Mongols also facilitated the exchange of technology. Through Silk Road trade, innovations from China changed the course of European history. Among the most important were gunpowder. Originally developed in Tang Dynasty China, gunpowder was adopted by Mongol armies. Mongols used gunpowder bombs in battles against Persia and Europe. By the 14th century, Europeans had learned gunpowder warfare, leading to the rise of cannons and firearms. 2. The compass. Invented in China, the magnetic compass reached Europe via the Mongols. This tool helped European explorers navigate the oceans, fueling the age of exploration. 3. Printing and paper. The Mongols encouraged the spread of Chinese papermaking and print. By the 15th century, this knowledge inspired Gutenberg's printing press in Europe, revolutionizing literacy. 4. The Black Death. Unfortunately, the Mongol trade network also spread disease. In the 1330s, the bubonic plague broke out in China and traveled west via Silk Road trade routes. By 1347, the disease reached Europe, causing the Black Death, which killed 25–50 million people. The plague devastated Mongol cities and trade centers, weakening the empire, and leading to the decline of Silk Road trade. The fall of the Mongol Empire and the decline of the Silk Road. By the late 14th century, the once mighty Mongol Empire had fragmented into rival khanates. Internal conflicts, combined with the plague and economic decline, weakened the empire. Key events that marked the Silk Road's decline. 1368, the Ming Dynasty overthrew the Mongols in China and closed Silk Road trade routes. 1405, the death of Tamerlane, a Central Asian conqueror, ended Silk Road revival attempt. 1453, the Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople, further restricting land trade. 1498, Portuguese explorers reached India by sea, making ocean trade faster and safer. With the rise of maritime trade, the Silk Road was no longer the primary trade network. By the 16th century, ocean trade routes dominated global commerce. The lasting impact of the Silk Road. Although the Silk Road physically declined, its legacy remains alive today. Cultural exchange. The fusion of Greek, Persian, Indian, and Chinese cultures shaped art, architecture, and cuisine. Many Central Asian languages and traditions originated from Silk Road interactions. Globalization. The Silk Road laid the foundation for modern international trade. Today's Belt and Road Initiative, China's modern Silk Road project, follows ancient technology transfer. The spread of gunpowder, paper, and the compass led to Europe's Renaissance and global exploration. The modern internet mirrors the Silk Road's exchange of knowledge. Conclusion. The Mongols unified the Silk Road, creating the greatest era of global trade in the pre-modern world. Under their rule, merchants, scholars, and travelers connected continents, exchanging goods, technologies, and ideas. Yet the same networks that enriched civilizations also spread disease and war. As the Mongol Empire declined, so too did the land-based trade routes of the Silk Road. But while the Silk Road itself disappeared, its impact on human history remains undeniable. It shaped economies, cultures, and the modern world itself.